Welcome to Keith Knight Don't Tread on Anyone and the Libertarian Institute. Today I'm joined by Chrissie Mayr of the Chrissie Mayr podcast. She is also the host of the Wet Spot Show on Compound Media. Did you get that name from an Andrew Dice Clay routine by any chance?
No. Does he talk about that?
You know, that's just a line of his that I had forgotten until right now. Where did the name come from?
It came from when I was just thinking, like, okay, what should I call a show that I'm planning to have comedians on, adult film stars on, TV personalities, and we're going to talk about sex, dating, and relationships. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to call it The Wet Spot. And then I was like, no, that's too gross. It's too vulgar. And then my boyfriend was like, no, that's actually perfect. So it's been Chrissie Mayr's Wet Spot ever since. And it's just fun. I always like when there's callers and I can say, hello, you're on the Wet Spot,
Well, it's great marketing. I have not forgotten the name since I've heard it. So, Chrissie, you dared to tweet something that just said scam of the century. Chrissie, what is the scam of the century?
Oh my God. I mean, like, it's how badly do you want to keep your YouTube channel here?
We're also streaming on Odyssey. Well, pre-recorded, but we'll be on Odyssey. So, I'm at 2 strikes anyways on YouTube. I would love for you to be the final domino in that coffin, please.
I could not live with myself if I was the one to 86 your channel. It's definitely COVID. It's definitely the coof, whatever, all the code words that we've had to learn to use over the months and years. God, years, right? Like, remember when it was cute to say that you had a pandemic baby, and now you could easily have 2 pandemic babies. Like, your whole family could be a pandemic family. Like, you could have met, gotten married, and had kids during this pandemic. It's like we're going into our 3rd year, which is freaking crazy. And I personally have, like, much probably like yourself, like, I've gone through waves of being like patient with humanity, my fellow brothers and sisters, and then being like, what is taking you people so long? Like, wake the fuck up. How do you not see what's going on? And then, but ultimately I've landed in a kind of patient place of like, look, if I've grown a lot over the last 2 years. I've shed a lot of friends, right? Like, and now you realize, oh, they weren't friends. If they're going to unfriend you or stop returning your calls and texts because of how you feel about the vaccine or the pandemic or like January 6th, it's like all Trump, like it's all been lumped into a couple of years of struggle. But absolutely the way that COVID has been handled is the scam of the century. It's just been a massive effort to screw over the little guy, anybody with a small business, anybody even trying to keep like on a larger level, businesses, a massive amount of wealth being transferred to the elites. Like, that's on a mega level. And then, like, I'm not an expert in economy or like money, and like I'm sure you've had people on who could go on and on about the Fed and currency and like crypto and like what's happening to the dollar, and all of that scares me very much. But that's the larger level. And then I feel like it's trickled down even to the smallest level of like it's escalated all, like a lot of this sort of like trans bullshit, like CRT in schools. It's even become like a challenge, I think, to stay in your relationship because the powers that be like want us all separated, want us all at each other's throats. It's been very clever to see what the government has done in terms of these regulations. Like they know that a lot of this is unconstitutional. And now people are finally starting to be like, if you have held out on getting the jab, you're like, oh, wow. Like what did Boris over in the UK just flat out dropped? I talk like he's my buddy. Oh, Boris, but that's only because I have trouble remembering his last name. And I know it's not Boris Yeltsin. It's Boris
Johnson.
Fuck. This is why I just stick to Boris. He's dropped everything over in the UK. I've heard that within the next 45 days, many other countries will follow suit. So people that have held out this long on getting the jab are like, oh, wow. And it's also like it might not even be long enough for most people who've held out on the jab to see the benefits yet. I think as more people start to drop like flies, unfortunately, like people that are middle-aged and up will start to be like, damn. Like, and I'm going to do a video about this later. Like, we've already seen a lot of celebrities die, and we're not even through the first month of the year yet. It's been like Betty White, Louis Anderson today, Bob Saget, a couple others.
Meatloaf just died today.
Meatloaf! My God, that really hits home. So, and I'm just like, damn, right? Because the more people that die and the more like the numbers are kind of kept from us, we're going to see. But what we will notice and what they can't hide, I think, are celebrity deaths. So that will be an interesting measure of how many people are dying from this thing. And I know that makes me sound like a crazy conspiracy theorist. Like, I hope that so many people got saline. I hope that so many people are going to be fine. Like, I definitely, unlike Bill Gates, don't want to see a lot of people drop dead because it's just such a scam. Like, people were coerced into getting this thing. People like myself, like I lost my day job that I had for 6 years that I don't really talk about because I have so many trolls that would love nothing more than to try to get me fired from said day job. But now it doesn't matter because I'm fired. So, and it's been an interesting process because the whole time I've been doing comedy, I've always had at least some job, like ranging from being a shoe model for a shoe company to working for like a fashion week production company, literally like making cords with my bare hands, to being an assistant at a hedge fund during the financial crisis of 2008. Like, I've seen a lot in my day. I feel like an old person, but it's been very interesting to work at this company, and like, hopefully soon I'll get to like really be splashy and talk details. But it's been interesting to be at this particular company during the last few years, which has been like kind of a political awakening for me. I graduated college a very brainwashed feminist, like very much hating men, very much a liberal, voted for Obama the first time. The second time I really didn't want to miss yoga, so I didn't vote at all. And then voted for Jill Stein in 2016, only came around to Trump, in time for 2020. So I've had kind of a process, but I think especially working at this particular job that I've been at, and all the while I've been awakening to like the evils of the mainstream media. It's been a real conflict of interests for me, and I've been like, I've got to bite my tongue, keep that salary. So that'll be cool when I can finally talk about that. But basically, what this company has done, and what many other companies have done, is they fire people and they call it voluntary resignation. They make you sign a thing. I haven't signed yet. Probably not ever. I'm in negotiations. So these companies are very sneaky in what they are doing. And then you start learning about the ESG scores that many of these corporations have to start subscribing to. The ESG score is, I think it's called, I was just talking about this yesterday. I have like the memory of a goldfish. I think it's economic, sustainable, and governance. And it's basically a social credit score for corporations. And I only noticed this because I worked for a big corporation the last 6 years, but I think we're going to see this popping up more and more. And it's basically like, what is their diversity quota? What is their sustainability? Like, whatever the powers that be, value in a company, and it has to do with however high your ESG score is, that's what's going to attract certain investors to your company. And if it's not high, well then, oh no, what's going to happen? So there's just been so much the last 2 years, like, and you can see, like anytime you hear or see clips of somebody get into a fight over a mask, it's like, because those people have snapped. Like, I joke about it. I got into a fight with a lady in a nail salon on Christmas Eve because I wasn't wearing a mask. And the ladies that worked at the nail salon didn't care. Like, I'm a regular. They just want business. they're like Asian. You know what I mean? There's enough people who aren't going back to nail salons because they still think that there's bats flying around with COVID. So they didn't care. But this Karen couldn't let it go. She couldn't handle, because she herself was all in on this scam. She probably was vaxxed, boosted. Unfortunately, she had a daughter with her. She probably got her vaxxed and boosted, and could not handle that I was sitting there alive with no mask on. They can't handle, like, wait, you're alive, you're unafraid. I feel for these people. Like, we talk about, like, oh, I've gone from being patient to impatient to, like, wanting people to just wake up. And it's like, I ultimately feel bad for a lot of people who haven't been able to put the pieces together themselves, because they just, the friends you're around are so important. Like, who is challenging you in your life? If you're around a bunch of yes people, or you don't have anybody intellectually curious, or every one of your friends and family has the same politics and doesn't question anything and isn't a free thinker, doesn't think critically, it's caused a lot of people to snap over the last couple of years, because they were told if they were a good little obeying citizen and got vaxxed and boosted, well, then life would go back to normal for them. And it hasn't for anybody. And you can't yell at the government. The government is not accessible, but who can you yell at? Who is accessible? It's your unvaccinated neighbor. It's your unmasked neighbor. And it's, again, caused a real division, right? We talk about, like, the trickling down effect. It's caused real division. And I think it started, like, remember, like, when Trump was president, it was like, I broke up with my boyfriend because he voted for Trump. Like, and that was kind of cute. And now it's just like, I haven't talked to my family in 2 years because of the pandemic. It's like, whoa, things have gotten crazy.
Well, and it's amazing that in response to the jab not working as well as was more or less promised to us, they say, well, technically, not even polio vaccines last forever. Well, there's an important difference. There's an important difference between the plumber comes and my pipes break 10 years later, and they break while he's walking out the door. At some point, it's a scam. We get it. The pipes don't last forever, but it's heavily implied that this is going to give us a heavy amount of stability in at least the near future. So in response to Big Pharma, the left has not blamed Moderna, Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson, companies that have committed so many crimes and paid billions in restitution. They take it out on people who are skeptical of it. Malone famously said, this is the first time I've ever studied where throughout history, people that don't take a medicine are being blamed for its lack of efficacy. And it's incredible. It's not that they don't pin it on Fauci, even though they say masks save lives. Fauci came out 2020 in March on 60 Minutes and said, it's important to not wear a mask. You end up touching it. And then that's actually where the virus comes in. He rejected the Wuhan lab leak theory, which, as the book Viral by Matt Ridley clearly makes the case that it came from here and not a bat cave 800 kilometers away. So by every metric, they're total lockdowns. There's no correlation between low numbers and states that had heavy lockdowns either. So yeah, it's.
Before we started recording, we were talking about how much we love the Adam Carolla show, Adam Carolla Love Line, right? And he did that with Dr. Drew Pinsky. And I interviewed Dr. Drew, at least a year ago. It was a while ago. And he was like, yeah, these lockdowns are bullshit. I didn't know how he was going to be on any of this stuff. You don't know what people can and can't say in terms of their personal feelings. And he was, very upfront about the lockdowns being totally useless and complete bullshit. And it's really weird. It's like they keep making the wrong decision on every front. And it's like, wow, after a while, you're like, you can't help but think, are they doing this on purpose? And, right, because, there's some crackheads in New York City that have had the same mask since March of 2020. And they probably haven't gotten COVID or they have gotten it 3 times over. And guess what? Because it's not a big deal for most people. And no one has a stronger immune system than a crackhead. So maybe the next pandemic is going to wipe out the crackheads, but not this one.
Yeah, all you have to do, a wise man once told me, all we really have is credibility. Even if you're looking at a primary document that was written by a fallible human being who could be lying. So all we have is credibility. Who are the big names who told us a year after the vaxes come out, we'll have more cases than ever before? There will be more deaths under Biden than Trump. You need at least 4 shots in Israel, and lockdowns, we won't see a correlation between high lockdowns in states in America with comparable populations. That we're not going to see a clear correlation between the numbers. So if you haven't guessed that, or not guessed, if you weren't saying that years ago, you just don't have credibility. I'm just so fucking bored of you. So just stop talking to me about this whole thing. It's just so boring, along with how evil the lockdowns are. The crime of being so boring that, hey, cases are up again. Yeah. Yeah, that just means nothing to me at this point. So
yeah, what do you think should happen when you vaccinate during a pandemic? Like, so many scientists have said that that's what's going to happen. And it's like, I'm sorry to like interrupt you, but you're like, I like that that's your stance. Like, yeah, I really can't listen to you at all if you weren't saying this a year plus ago, you know. Like, if you've just arrived at this now, then you don't know more than, like, you and I. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you just don't know. I'm not you're just playing with an 8-ball at this point. A magic 8-ball, not a
right. And
cocaine.
Like, but they
I'm like, oh my God, I know half the audience is
8-ball. I'm very wholesome, of course. I thought immediately of the plastic 8-ball. I was like, am I going to get a boyfriend this year? Because that was so much of my life. Right.
I haven't seen one.
They sound smart. They sound like they're CNN-ified. This is a word I just made up. And so you go, oh, okay, they're on the mainstream media. They are in makeup and wearing a suit or a nice dress. And you go, okay, I have to listen to this person. And it's like, they don't fucking know what they're talking about. If they're just catching up to where you're at, yeah, turn off the TV. Like, go and people give Alex Jones shit, but he was right on so much of this. Alex Berenson, I would suggest like subscribing to his Substack. He's written a couple of like small, probably larger books too, but he's written these small kind of pamphlet like books you can get on Amazon that have to do with like kind of different stages of the last 2 years. Like, very interesting, especially if you're like, if you're intimidated by a big thick book. And like, I also got The Real Anthony Fauci by RFK. I'm reading that right now. That's a big one. It's like, that's not an easy breezy summer read, but if you can, like, I'm starting to get through it, and very interesting too. Just how they're lying and hiding so much information.
Yeah, definitely. And it's not like whenever they're proven wrong, like tons of people get fired and they revamp these institutions, they just get more funding and then blame people who were questioning in the first place.
It's so crazy.
So when we talk about scam of the century, a lot of people hear, so you're saying COVID doesn't exist. When what I am saying, at least when I agree with you on this, is I'm talking about the response. So just like terrorism does exist, the war on terror is an explicit scam. Ignorance exists. Government education is the scam. Poverty exists, but the welfare state is a scam.
Wow,
the war on drugs, drug addiction is a real thing. The war on drugs is a total scam. So we're talking about the state's coercive, tyrannical response, not the existence of a virus. It's
so dirty. They did us so dirty. Like, they're
not
just
cool.
You just don't think that your government and the powers that be, the people that are supposed to kind of like take care of you, are just waiting like a snake in the grass. Like, when can we pounce and take as much power as possible? When can we like sink our teeth in and suck up as much money as we can from the middle class? And I never thought, like, I'm hearing myself talk this way. I never thought I would like, I was always like, oh, I'm a dumb comedian. Like, I make dick jokes, but I hope that many other people's eyes have been similarly opened. Like, it feels like Bird Box. You know what I mean? Like, someone has to be like, look at what's happening.
So Jerry Seinfeld was on the Johnny Carson show some very long time ago. I couldn't find a date. And he had a joke, and I thought it was actually pretty telling. Tell me what you hear when you hear this. He says, what amazes me about the newspaper is that somehow, every day, no matter what goes on in the world, it exactly fits the number of pages they're using in the paper that day. How does that work out? They never have big blank spots where nothing happened. Never have to cram things into the margins because there's too much occurring. It's a perfect fit every time. They must sit around after each edition and go, I can't believe we just made it again. Hurry up and get the paper out before any more things happen. If one more thing takes place, we're screwed. We'll have to put it in the crossword puzzle. What do you hear when you hear that?
That's really funny. That's like, especially when you think of the New York Times slogan, all the news that's fit to print. And you're like, oh, no, it's like you're making news that fits. Like, you're just like, you've decided that day what gets talked about, what doesn't get talked about. Like, they could probably make newspapers that are twice or three times as big every day and talk about so many more things. But they're just like, oh, what are we choosing to highlight today? Like, what are our big pharma sponsors telling us to focus on?
Exactly. And that's where the bias comes from in the selecting some stories over another. So it's not that January 6th was not really a date that ever existed. It's they talk about it all the time and will say things like that deadly day. Well,
God.
Look, the officer murdered an unarmed white woman. That did happen, correct? But they're never going to say it like that. They'll say an officer died after the fighting. Yeah, he died of an unrelated stroke.
People having heart attacks and strokes. You're gonna attribute that to people there January 6th. And like, I was there that day, and I go on interviews, and like, I've talked even to Megyn Kelly back in July. I was talking about, like, from my perspective, like, people think there was 1 million to 2 million people there that day. For probably hundreds of thousands of us, it was a chill day. Most of us had no clue about the shenanigans going on until we were walking back to our hotels and looking at our phones, because like, there was no reception. It just was like dead all day. Like, maybe I could get out a tweet or two, but I wasn't able to like live stream the whole time like I wanted to. And it was like there were families, dogs, people in costumes, people with signs, people singing, people praying, people with like boom boxes. It was like a kind of like a Woodstock feeling of like a sense of community coming together. Like, so many of us had no idea that there were break-ins, that there were people getting into the building. People had no idea that some woman was shot. You know, we didn't have to bust down shit. We just could walk right up to the building. Like, there was not even a small fence to hop. Everything was wide open. And it's like, I haven't been to the Capitol many times. I don't know what the usual cop situation is, but it was like, it was as open as any other like public monument or like a museum. You know, that was the vibe. It's nobody had the feeling that they weren't supposed to be there, and it was a planned march point. It was in our little schedule, like the night before. Okay, we're gonna meet at the whatever, I don't know, the Triangle or something. There'd be speakers. And it's interesting because now you see like this, they talk about this guy, Ray Epps. Was he a Fed? Wasn't he a Fed? And he was there at that night before. I didn't see him, but yelling to people, like, yeah, we got to get inside, escalating things. And then the next day it was like, okay, we're going to meet at the President's Circle at 8 a.m. And we were there all morning. We're so tired. Trump was supposed to get there at 12. I think, no, he's supposed to get there at 11. He didn't get there till 12. And then we had to be at the Capitol at 1. So many of us like left before he was done speaking because we're freezing our asses off. And when people go, oh, it's deadly, like the amount of blowback I got after that day, like, is really crazy. Because I'm like, you people kind of have like, I was there to cover the events because I knew the mainstream media was barely going to cover it, because they barely covered the November one. They barely covered the December rally over there. And that really woke me up too. I'm like, these people that weren't there are calling me an insurrectionist, are calling me like a horrible person that I need to be excommunicated from the New York City comedy community because I literally am there with a selfie stick and a camera and I'm doing Man on the Street. I was like, wow, like, people are just confidently running with the mainstream narrative of what happened that day instead of listening to the people who were actually there. That's what's scary. And then you think about all of our elders and older people being kind of killed off right now. And, you know, who was wisdom passed down from, like, for centuries, from the older people? Who is dying mostly in this pandemic? The older people. They're censoring our internet. They're not printing certain books anymore. Even certain Dr. Seuss books aren't getting printed anymore. And I had those books rush delivered to me as soon as they were like going to start being out of print. And I read them all. I'm like, there's nothing in here. These aren't racist. Like, I thought I'd open up a Dr. Seuss book and be like, hop on Fox, he's a fag. And I was like, no, there's nothing like that. It's just like they said Chinaman in one of the 5 or 6 books that were like bad and not going to be printed anymore. I was like, this is nothing. They're like stopping. They're not printing certain books anymore. we know from year to year that the textbooks that are used in schools are reprinted and changed. Why? Partially so that they can keep charging you top dollar. You know, God forbid you use a used textbook. I mean, like, I think in college a little bit here and there I could get away with a used one, but most you had to buy new ones because each book is like $100+. Probably it's even more now. So we have reprinted editions of books. Why? History doesn't change, but it's probably been quietly changed under our noses. So that's scary because it's like, I don't even know. You don't even know how much stuff has been changed. And now all our old people are dying. They're just, they're trying to like break down society so they can rebuild it in their way. Yes.
I want to get into some of your favorite books. Let's start with 12 Rules for Life by Jordan Peterson. I want to name one of the rules, and you tell me what you learned from this rule, or if it was unimportant and we can just skip it. So, rule number 1, Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules of Life: stand up straight with your shoulders back. Why do you think that's important?
Well, that's just good. I think to me, because I came from like throughout my 20s, all I did was read self-help books. And that's how I kind of arrived, at like appreciating Jordan Peterson. I think it's just standing up straight to me, that's like a fake it till you make it. Like, of course, yeah, good posture is imperative, but it's the whole idea of like holding your head high, even if you're not feeling very confident in yourself. If you just put it into your body, like, I'm going to be confident, I'm going to like approach the world dick first. You know what I mean? Like, good things are going to happen to you. So I think that's a good, like, put it into your physicality and then the rest will follow.
Rule number 2, treat yourself like someone you are responsible for helping.
Wow. These are all good. Because I think a lot of us, especially women, have the tendency to like put others first to a fault. Like, we like nurture and support, and then sometimes we put ourselves last. Sometimes we put ourselves never. So especially like, I'm not a mom, but I know a lot of moms get caught in this. They just become martyrs. Like, that's how my mother was. And you just are of no good. Like, if you're running around with a quarter to empty tank all the time, like, you're just going to be, I think, resentful and going to just miss out on a lot of little things. So yeah, don't forget that you need to take care of yourself too. Like, whether that's, hey, well, what's something that brings me joy? Like painting, drawing, even if it's not like, goal oriented. Sometimes you just have to take time out like for fun and take care of yourself.
Rule number 3, make friends with people who want the best for you.
Ooh, yeah, that's all about your tribe. That's all about like, look at the people who are surrounding you, and are they on Team Chrissie? Are they on Team Keith? Like, do they care? Like, God, I'm so blessed to have a boyfriend who like wants nothing more than me to achieve my goals and wants me to reach my potential. Like, I almost feel like I don't even deserve that. It's crazy, and but it's important to like look at who your friends are. Obviously, we have no control of our family, but we do have control over our friends and like, our significant others, and just making sure that the people who you are spending the most time with or talking to are going to uplift you. Like, and a good way to figure that out is like, after you get off the phone with somebody or after you've hung out with somebody, do you feel depleted? Do you feel like the life has been sucked out of you? Or do you feel light? Do you feel happy? Do you feel like that person has given you life?
Excellent criteria for an example, because you could say, does this person make you happy? It's like, well, yes, sometimes no. On net, I'm glad to know them. But that after the phone call feeling, that's a great metric.
When you hang up and you're like, ugh, I need a drink,
I gotta lay down. I gotta get to bed early.
Or you hang up and you're like, this bitch didn't ask me about me, like didn't even know I got fired. We didn't even get to me. So
rule number 4, compare yourself to who you were yesterday, not to who someone else is today.
That's so good, especially with social media. Like, all we see is the filtered best version, best day that everybody else is having. Yeah, ultimately, you are only in competition with yourself. And a good way to keep that in mind is to look at what you were doing a year ago, whether you can measure that by metrics of your follow, if you're following your video count, like things like that, or if you're not in like, the YouTube social media game, yeah, maybe you look at your income. Maybe you look at your good habits. Like, okay, are you working out more times than you were last year? All right, could you step that up? Yeah, step that up by like one day. Don't try to kill yourself. Or how have your relationships improved since last year? Instead of like, what we all do, we look at somebody who's like our age and maybe, they've accomplished more than us. Like, I should be at this point now, or like, I'm comparing myself to other comedians who've been doing it for 10 years. And of course, you're going to naturally tend to comparing yourself to somebody who's doing better because, like, I think our minds, like, sometimes want us to feel bad, or like sometimes our minds want us to be prepared, but it's like sometimes in our mind's quest for knowledge, we end up doing things that are maybe not so good, or thinking thoughts that are not good for us. And I think comparison, it's like, it's the what do they say? It's the thief of joy. It's going to steal your joy. That's what my grandma always said. So, right, you don't have control over anybody else. You don't know, what help other people are getting. You don't know who has rich parents, who has a super leg up in life. So the best thing to do is just like look at yourself a year ago, and like small incremental progress is so much better than being like, I'm going to blow up overnight. Like I need an idea. I need a scam or something.
Rule number 5, do not let your children do anything that makes you dislike them.
Ooh. Wow, that's interesting. I don't have any children, but yeah, because think about it. If you dislike your kids, you're going to slowly, right, as a parent, you can't afford to dislike your kids because you are tasked with the responsibility of raising this person and giving them the tools to succeed in life. So just like with a friend, and they start doing shit you don't like, you can slowly like put them on the fade, and because you have other friends, like, but you can't afford to do that with your kids. So if your kid starts doing drugs and that makes you like them less, it makes you pull away. You're like, no, you have to stop that, because like you have to stay liking them until they're 18 so that you can do your job. It's like a really interesting way to think of it. And if some would say, oh, you're raising your kid to be like you. It's like, right, well, you have to like them because it's your job to like keep them to task. So
yeah, that's one of the big things I see, where especially with friends, because I don't have kids either, if you sort of, I don't want to say let, like you own people, but people do something without you sort of letting them know it pisses you off, or disassociating with them, not in the case of a child, but with a friend, you end up building so much resentment, not only at the end of the day, but after years of, oh my God, I've spent years being pissed off at you, and then you finally mention it and they go, oh, I had no clue that upset you. Well, why didn't you tell me? Well, now all that time is wasted. Now you're 2 years closer to death than if you had just mentioned it previously. So not putting yourself in a place where you will potentially feel resentment is so liberating. And once you realize people are not entitled to your time or a good opinion of yours, then you just have no, you know what, here are my standards. Here's what I like to associate with. And if you don't like it, well, there's 7 billion people on the planet with internet connections. Go meet them.
Wow.
Thanks.
Yeah, that's actually that's really good to hear. Because I was just talking about this with my boyfriend last night. Like, I could be way closer with my family, but I feel like certain things have put like a little bit of a wedge in between us. Like, my mom died and we all kind of fell apart and we're not as close anymore. And I feel like my family has truly no interest in getting to know me. And I just mean like I have a small family, so it's like my dad, my sister, my brother. Like, we talk about those phone calls where you hang up and you're like, they didn't ask about me. And it's like, and it sucks because I have spent the last few years like kind of, I don't know if I've distanced myself from them or they've distanced themselves from me, but it's just kind of like we're not close anymore. Like, and I kind of don't even know where to begin. So yeah, and I do have some resentment. So I have to work on that this year. I think like, and I think it's probably because I'm afraid to be honest and I'm afraid to hurt people's feelings. So I think once you get closer to honesty, how could that not work out in your favor? So
hopefully in the long run. Rule number 6, set your house in perfect order before you criticize the world.
That's such a good, like, old school, like, grandma, grandpa tip. Like, Don't talk shit unless your shit is totally together. I mean, that's not how my grandma said it, but it's so easy to criticize other people. It is so easy to like call somebody else fat. I do this all the time. Yesterday I just called Lena Dunham fat. I was like, she had this big photo spread of her. I'm coming out. This is a rebirth. And I was like, girl, you look like an afterbirth. You look like shit. But it's like, I do because it's comedy. It's funny. It's funny to make people laugh. But right, ideally, I shouldn't be making fun of somebody else's appearance until I look as good as I possibly can. But I don't want to wait a year to like make fun of somebody's appearance. So, but like, don't call somebody else, don't criticize somebody else unless, because you always could. And that's the thing is like, you're kind of, don't get into the habit of doing that because you could waste a lot of time comparing yourself instead of looking inward and being like, okay, well, I could have used that time to get my finances order. I could have used that time to clean up my house. I could have used that time trying to get closer with people in my life. So it's another, I think, don't compare piece of advice.
I see this a lot in sort of my field where people will have the highest standards that are damn near impossible for their opponents and more or less no standards for themselves. Those idiots believe in conspiracy theories on January 6th. You said Vladimir Putin hacked the entire 2016 election, and your pro-science view of climate change doesn't account for there are fewer natural disaster deaths today than ever before in history. So trust me, you are not that cool. You're not that smart mocking someone else's house when your house is a complete mess, like could make the Hoarders edition of A&E. Like that's how bad it is. So it's the concept that at least what I'm hearing of this is, yeah, it's important to have standards for other people, but also you can only indirectly control them. You only directly control your own life. So even for people, even for someone like myself, it's sort of cheap for me to criticize the Federal Reserve all day when I still haven't cleaned the garage. I mean, can't I freaking multitask? The thing has been a mess for 10 goddamn years.
That's a funny tweet. That would be a great tweet.
Okay. If I tag you, you have to retweet it.
Then you have a picture of your garage. Yeah, I would definitely retweet that.
Number 7, pursue what is meaningful, not what is expedient.
Ooh, okay, right. Not going for like the quick fix.
Well,
right.
Why did you? Well, let's take this. Why did you pursue a career in comedy?
Not because it's expedient, that's for sure.
But isn't making people laugh relatively meaningful?
It's extremely meaningful, but the career of comedy is not glamorous and a very hard road, and there's no certainties at all. It's not like I'm going to be a doctor. Like, well, then you know exactly what steps to take. I'm going to be a teacher. The path is laid out already. I'm going to be a comedian. It's like, okay, there's no path laid out for you to make a living doing comedy. You really got to trial and error and knock around for a few years to figure it out. And now it's kind of like, all right, I've arrived at this place where it's some combination of performing on stage, podcasting, and like hosting other events and stuff. Yeah.
Well, you work with Anthony Cumia. I mean, isn't that a pretty big accomplishment?
Yeah, that's definitely an accomplishment. That was probably my first step towards making my whole living just from comedy. It's like, and I pitched a show to him like 2019. So I've been working with him like a couple of years now. But it's definitely not enough to like make a whole living off of. That's why it's like you have to pursue like multiple streams of income. It's enough to pay like a bill. So you have to pursue like multiple streams of income. But I wanted it bad enough because I've always been working a regular day job. So it's taken me like incrementally along. It's like probably exactly that rule. Pursue like what meaningful instead of expedient. Like I knew I worked over a period of like probably like 5 or 6 years. I've been doing comedy 10, 11, but been really focused probably since like 2015. Like slowly taking steps, start making a living from comedy. And it only really started to come together 2019. So I failed for like a lot of years. And I just was like, oh, I love doing this. I love making people laugh. But it got to be, I couldn't sustain doing a 9-to-5 day job and performing at night. It just is too much. Like I would be working all day at like being some desk slave and then run out, fix my hair on the subway, put on makeup on the subway, change my shoes, get on stage by, 7 or 8 o'clock, or doing multiple open mics or doing multiple shows. And then your last show is really late. You get on a train. I travel like an hour to get home and you're not in bed till like 2. I did that for years. And that's just not, you can't keep that up. You're going to be fucking exhausted. And then there were some day jobs I had where I had to be at my job at 8 a.m., and then at that time I was also dating another stand-up comic. We'd be up fighting till like 2 a.m. easily every night. So that was like, I can't believe I didn't drop dead. Like, it's just, it completely, thoroughly exhausted me. So it's like, I knew I can't keep doing this day job thing and comedy. So I need to start figuring out a way to just make a living off of comedy, because I'm going to fucking, you don't have time for anything else. Like, you have absolutely no time to start a family. You have absolutely no time to travel leisurely. You're barely going on like out to dinner for dates. Like, my whole life for years was a 9-to-5 job, and then either some kind of improv class or doing open mics or doing shows until the late hours of the night.
Rule number 8, tell the truth, or at least don't lie. Well, while you're finishing that sip of water, I just have to go back to one person we're talking about. Fauci, when he was being, what would you call it, during his hearing with Rand Paul said, so, Dr. Fauci, you don't consider it gain of function, increasing a virus's function, when scientists take a animal virus in bats and increase its ability to then infect humans intentionally? Them doing this is not gain of function. He goes, no, Senator Paul. This could not have been a more explicit case of someone explicitly lying. So, yes.
That's crazy. That's literally what it is. That is literally what it is. You are literally gaining the function. You are literally increasing the function of the virus when you do that. You're literally trying to teach it to do more than it naturally does. And it's crazy because you look at him and go, he's an old man. He looks like somebody's dad or grandfather. How could he be lying? And he's so, again, he's wearing a jacket. He's wearing a clean shirt. He's on TV. He has expensive glasses on. How could he be lying? You want so badly to believe the people that are in power want the best for you. And that's the biggest red pill, is being like, oh, no. Not only do they not, they just want to make as much money as they can. Or in Fauci's case, stay a celebrity as long as he can, because he fucking loves the attention.
Oh my God, that attention has to be heroin. I wonder if I were offered it. If I were offered that, if I would turn it down. Of course, it seems cool when I'm nowhere near to being offered it. I would say no. I'd say screw yourself. If I were offered like $1 billion, dear God, I hope I'd say no.
I can't even imagine.
It's so tempting.
I can't imagine what he makes. Like, he makes, I think, $350K just from his salary. He's the highest paid, I think, government employee ever.
Yeah, but I mean, you can't even measure the psychic benefit of everyone wanting to talk to you.
Your dick.
Billions of views saying, oh, but people with the Fauci masks on, and getting all these meetings with the World Health Organization. Yeah, that would be just such a power trip. So anything else on tell the truth, or at least don't lie?
Yeah, I think that has to do with like getting as close to honest as you can with the people in your life. Like, yeah, I think I always keep thinking back to like personal relationships, and like that's why it's good that we're both on this show, because like you're like you do a really good job of the repercussions of like people in charge and the kind of like the media makers. Yeah, I think of course you don't want to don't actively lie, especially when you're on camera. So much of your career is you can go back and watch it and be like, here you are caught in a lie, or here you are looking stupid, or like, I can't believe you didn't know the truth here. That's always good, just to tell the truth. It's less to remember later on, and especially with your interpersonal relationships, if you can't be totally honest with somebody, like if someone's like, do I look fat in this dress? It's like, okay, you don't have to say that you look fucking amazing. Be like, it's not the best. It's not like it's not my favorite dress. You know what I mean? Like you can always get closer to the truth if you're not strong enough or you're not ready to be blunt. You know, you can always be a little more honest. I think that's a good rule.
Rule number 9, assume that the person you are listening to might know something that you don't.
Ooh, that's great. That's like, I mean, how many people in our media and in charge need to hear that rule? Yeah, it's just, I think that's a good reminder to like really listen, because like most people are just waiting for their turn to talk. And I have to be so wary of not doing that, like in podcasts, because you're like, oh, I have to sound smart. I have to sound like I'm worth listening to. And it's always good. Like, yeah, listen, like you can always learn a small thing from someone, and like your day could be changed and you could look at things a little bit differently in a way that can help you. Like, I think that's good to remember. Like, yeah, the other person can help you.
Yeah, that amount of humility, I think, is definitely needed by the media, especially when I see articles that say, why no one saw inflation coming. And meanwhile, the poor guy from Ukraine and then Austria and then came to America, Ludwig von Mises, wrote a book in, I think, 1921 called The Theory of Money and Credit, where he explained that an increase in the money supply leads to higher prices than otherwise would exist.
Wow.
Like 80 to 100 years ago, he wrote a book on this. And then Trump and Biden collectively increased the money supply by like 40% since the pandemic. And everyone's like,
why would they do that? Like, why would they do that?
Well, because it benefits them and their cronies at a higher rate than it costs them to dilute the money supply. So why would I try to print $1 billion when that would weaken the value of my money? Well, because I'm getting this huge benefit called $1 million and the political connections that come with being able to print money and send out checks to people. Also, if, say, the airline bailouts were a big one, which they printed billions of dollars, or they didn't even print, they just increased the number in your bank account. Well, what happens when he who pays the piper calls the tune? What if the airlines don't want to toe the line of the government agenda anymore? What if they don't want to have signs all over the airlines that say mask up? Well, that's how you get people on the same page, simply by being their source of income. So it's never like, my CEO told me to not talk bad about him, but I know that if I don't toe the line more or less, then I'm screwed. Same thing happens in government. So yeah, monopolizing the money supply with the Federal Reserve has always been the source for a lot of their power.
Wow. Yeah,
Number
learn
10.
Something. Thanks, Jordan.
Number 10, be precise in your speech.
God, this is such a good rule for podcasting, especially when I listen back and I hear how many likes I say and how many ums. It's always good to have some kind of a script written out, especially if you're like talking about something pretty important. Being precise in your speech, yeah, it also has to do with like keeping your word. I hear that in there too. You know, like don't make promises you can't keep, or if you do promise someone something, like really try to remember, like even something so small. Like my girlfriend forgot these straws that she bought from Starbucks. They're like reusable straws. They were in my trunk for like 2 months. And then the day that I saw her in the morning, I texted like, "Oh, get ready! You're gonna be reunited with your straws today." And then I left to go into the city, and I was like, "I don't have the straws." And I was like, "Fuck!" And it was the littlest, dumbest thing. And I was like, "I've been hyping up that today she's gonna get her straws back, so I had to drive back and get them because I was like, you know what I mean? I kind of promised her the straws."
Oh my God, the speech is your source of credibility. Now your straw social credit score has now diminished. That's terrible. I hope you're ashamed.
But I did get the straws. I went back, I got them. She was reunited with her straws, all as well. But yeah. No,
all right.
These rules kind of all work together. And I like that maybe some of these rules, it's saying the same thing, but in a different way. It's like hitting you at a different angle.
2 more. Do not bother children when they are skateboarding. What'd you learn from that section?
You have to let kids be kids, and don't try to make everything like, remember what it was like to be a kid, and like maybe resist the urge. I'm not saying don't put a helmet on your kid, but like it's okay to let them bang around a little bit. Like, man, I had so much unsupervised time as a kid. Like, I was a latchkey kid. Like, I'd be locked out of my house half the time, pooping in the backyard for hours. Like, not for hours, but like, I wasn't pooping for hours, but I just was like, my mom worked. I didn't have a key. I just like, well, that's how you learn. That's how you learn to remember your key. And I think maybe that rule has to do with like not being a hovering parent, not being, overly like managing kids.
Final rule: pet a cat when you encounter one on the street. That seems very specific.
When you ask me my favorite rule, this is my favorite rule. I just love animals. I've been doing this ever since before Jordan Peterson was famous. No, I always love petting random like dogs and cats. Cats are hard to randomly pet because they kind of run away. They're a little more like, who are you? But I pet every dog I can, and they're just like, oh, it brings me so much joy to like pet a dog and like talk to a dog and be like, how are you? And it's just, you have to like enjoy the little things in life. And like dogs are such a perfect example of like, dogs bring you into the present moment, and they don't hold grudges, and they just like, they love you, and they just love to like have fun and go outside, and like they're happy with simple things. So I think it's a good reminder to just like enjoy what you can in the moment. Stop to smell the roses, like literally stop to smell cookies when they come out of the oven. Like if someone smells good and it's not creepy, just be like, take a big sniff in, like all my advice is creepy. I'm like, you smell people.
Yeah, that would be a good 13th rule. You said another one of your favorite books is So You've Been Publicly Shamed by Jon Ronson. Please enlighten me on this book, because I have hated this guy for like 10 years.
Really?
Ever since. So what happened was Alex Jones told people that there's a group of elites who get together in the San Francisco forest, run around half clothed, and worship an owl to this sacred ritual. Everyone called him crazy. Turns out it's true. He got it on camera in his book, Dark Secrets Inside the Bohemian Grove, and he caught the ritual. So Jon Ronson said, well, you're full of garbage. And then he went there and saw it, and he goes, well, yeah, I mean, technically he's right, but it's just like a thing. It's sort of just like a play. So in other words, he says Alex is fake, and then Alex goes through this total burden of proving his case, and he goes, well, yeah, but so what? It's like with everything else.
What a loser. What a sore loser. He probably was like not trying to walk it back. Yeah.
He's in the documentary too. And then he doubles down on the Joe Rogan show when he talks about this. He goes, Alex is crazy. He thinks this. Like the same people who literally start wars, like the same Republicans, start wars, kill people. They have a cremate their care ceremony. And Ronson's like, nothing to look into. It's like playing a game of tennis. So
interesting. You wonder if someone like him is either compromised or just unable to admit when he's been wrong.
No, that would be so hard to admit when you're wrong. Either one would make sense. So please get me to stop hating this prick. What is the best thing you learned from So You've Been Publicly Shamed?
So this book is really good for anybody, any kind of public figure, anybody with like a big following, because we've seen people get canceled so many times, and just like it opened my eyes, because I think in 2018 I did an impression of a fellow comedian girl that it was taken totally out of proportion. Like rumors were started. It was crazy. Like I just did an impression of a girl, and then it was warped into I'm encouraging people to send her rape threats. Like it was insane. It was like just the most insane game of telephone ever. And I had done just an impression of this girl because she walked off a show because she got offended by a conversation about cultural appropriation. They were talking about Halloween costumes. And I just was like, oh, let me come in the next day and I'll have a dark wig on. I'll just be her. Like, she's this very woke comic from Brooklyn, feminist. You know what I mean? Like, and I can make fun of that because that's what I was. Like, I was that girl. Like, I lived in Brooklyn. I was a feminist. I hated men. So I can make fun of this because I'm like, I know where she's at. And made fun of her. And she was like, I think she messaged me the next day, like, did you do an impression of me? I'm like, yeah. And she's like, oh, you should be wary of those compound media guys. Like, they don't have your best interest. I'm like, this girl who doesn't know me is telling me what my best interest should or shouldn't be. She's like, you don't understand. Somebody said I should have a railroad spike up the keister. And I was like, where does somebody even get a railroad spike in 2018? Like, I didn't really take it seriously. And then I thought to myself, like the character wheels were spinning. So I came in the next day as a railroad spike. I was wrapped in tinfoil. Everyone's imagining the Alex Jones costume. Wrapped in tinfoil, but I was an anti-rape railroad spike. I was like, look, I was like this personified, like scratchy voice, like, I'm a railroad spike, but I don't like this idea of being up a human's keister. I don't want to be anybody's butt. I don't want to be a part of any rape. I'm anti-rape. I have a rail at home that I love very much and 6 little spikes. I'm a family man. I don't want to, it's stupid. Like, dumbest thing ever. I'm being an anti-rape railroad spike. Sure enough, what happens in the rumor mill, a picture of me, a screenshot of me doing the second impression on compound media, then gets passed around to like her and all of her friends. And at the time, she had better credits than me. She had a Comedy Central, I think she had a Comedy Central thing, and she definitely had a Netflix 15-minute special, which at the time, way better credits than me. So other comedians are going to fall in line behind her because they have more to gain from being on her side than from being on my side. I'm just a girl who has a show on compound media, and I hosted a show at a gay bar at Stonewall Inn for 6 years. So what do comics have more to gain? Being booked on my bar show at a gay bar, or Kate Willett, who has a 15-minute Netflix special and probably has more connections. So everybody is kind of on her side. This rumor then turned into Chrissie has gone on pretending to be this raping railroad spike. That was the rumor that got passed around through, comedy Facebook and lady comedy Facebook groups. And she rallied so many people against me, and it was wild. Like, it was a huge shedding, unfriending, kind of, I don't want to say blackballed, but like, it wasn't good. It wasn't good for like weeks. And so my friend Corinne Fisher, who is more like, very successful, kind of more high profile, she's part of this group called Guys We Fucked. I think they just got a show optioned for Fox, actually. Like, they're doing great. And she recommended this book to me. She was like, you need to read this book, like, So You've Been Publicly Shamed. And it taught me a lot. It made me realize that, like, the sort of mob psychology that happens in the process of somebody being shamed. Like, what was happening is, like, Kate's pretty high profile. I was getting to be more high profile. When you're being publicly shamed, when you're the target of everybody's ill will, you are kind of raised in that moment. Like, in my time of being shamed, you're kind of up here because you go from being here, everyone's talking about you, how horrible you are. You kind of, your profile raises a little bit. And what does everybody else want to do that's a comedian, or maybe they want to have their name in lights or be noticed? They also want to be raised up here, right? Because everyone's talking about me, everyone's talking about her, everyone's kind of down here. So they have to go, well, I hate Chrissie. Oh, I think she's racist. Oh, I think she is not a friend to women, right? You have to join in on this dog pile so that your own profile, your own name can be raised to meet that of the people up here. And it's also like a nod, like, hey, I'm letting everyone know that I'm on the right side, so continue to book me. I'm a friend of Kate's, not Chrissie. I'm on the good side here. And I realized, oh, this public shaming ultimately has to do with the other people than it does me. Because it's like, I know I didn't do those impressions in bad faith. I know I was just trying to make people laugh. I was just trying to make my friends laugh. Truly, it was an inside joke for the subscribers of Compound Media. It was not a public thing. It wasn't on YouTube. It wasn't on Facebook. It was literally on this subscriber base. And the confusion came about because people weren't watching the impressions. People just saw screenshots and assumed the worst. And it was truly insane. And it like pained me to be so misunderstood by so many people. But at the end of the day, I can't, if people aren't coming to me to ask me what happened, I can't explain it. And yeah, I would do posts and I would kind of explain myself here and there. I went on many podcasts to explain it. And, you know what I mean? If you're not going to seek me out to try to understand what happened, then we're not friends. And that book really helped me to understand the psychology of canceling. And it helped me to kind of like relax, breathe. Definitely not going to apologize for jokes or impressions as a comedian. I stand by everything I did and said. And I'm glad that I read that at that time, because maybe I would have panicked and apologized and like, done something I regretted.
Yeah, one of the great quotes from the book, he cites a guy, James Gilligan. James, is that his name? James Gilligan. And this guy studied the prison system. Referring to it, he said, all violence is an attempt to replace shame with self-esteem. Well, there is defensive violence, but still a very good point. A lot of violence in bars is not because I was physically threatened, it's I was insulted. And
that's with gangs too. Like all gang violence has to do with respect, right?
Yeah. He goes on to say, I have yet to see a serious act of violence that was not provoked by the experience of feeling shamed and humiliated, disrespected, and ridiculed. And that did not represent the attempt to prevent or undo this loss of face, no matter how severe the punishment, even if it includes death. So, yeah, this is actually a big thing. It's not just, okay, you're embarrassed, move on. This is actually a heavy motivator for a lot of aggression that we see. So, good call with that book.
Because I think what happened with this girl comic, she was made to feel like an imposter, like she couldn't hang, like she didn't have a good sense of humor, like she couldn't take a joke, like she took things too personally. She stormed off a show, which is not a cool move. Like that's not something that somebody with a thick skin would do. You'd stay and you'd either debate your point, you'd prove yourself why this is fucked up, hear me out. But to just walk out and not be part of a conversation shows a very thin skin and a weak person. And so I'm sure she was feeling self-conscious about that, and here everyone is pointing that out. And what can she do? She can call, compound media, everyone's all right, you're all rapists, you're all like every insult, you're all misogynist. I'm like, hi, I'm a woman, I have a show on the network, I'm on all the time. Oh, you must also hate women, you must be a self-hating woman. And I'm like, not really, but okay. So right, and she absolutely took advantage of the Me Too movement at the time. This is 2018, so she's like, oh, rape threat, and it's like, girl, this is not someone DMing you or someone tweeting at you is not a rape threat, really. I mean, like if someone's leaving a message on your machine, okay, go to the police with that. But it's like when your DMs and messages are open, like, I'm sorry, you can't take that seriously. So I don't know. Maybe I'm just like I have a thicker skin, or maybe I have a higher tolerance for that sort of thing, but I just think she showed her true colors.
Yeah. I think that we just might be kind of used to getting swimming against the tide, whereas Fauci fabricated a story the other day to Congress. He goes, a guy was pulled over driving across the country, said he was coming to D.C. to kill Fauci because Rand Paul told him to. And then he pulled up the Fire Fauci thing that's on Rand Paul's website. So it's like, you only got one serious death threat? You're the head of the NIH. How has half the country not done this?
Right?
I'm surprised it's only one. But, of course, they're so uppity.
What a pussy move. What a pussy move on Fauci's part. Like,
and it's a fake story. That story's not real.
Oh, okay.
I don't believe for a second that that's real.
Wow. That's what he does. Like, I remember I was listening to, like, they were going back. Yeah, he's the best. That guy, like, he really has been relentless on Fauci, and thank God, because so few people are willing to stand up to him. And then when he catches him in a lie or in a place where he's wrong, he goes, "Oh, you're wrong. You're totally wrong. You got it all wrong. You always do this." Instead of going, "Here's why I'm right. Here's why you're wrong." He doesn't stick to the facts. He gets emotional. He gets like, "Oh, you always do this." And I'm like, "Oh,
not very scientific for someone who loves science so much."
He is science. He's
yeah, really. One final question. Thank you so much for being generous with your time. Aldous Huxley wrote a letter to George Orwell in 1949, and he said,
"Wow,
whether in actual fact the policy of the boot on the face can go on indefinitely seems doubtful. My own belief is that the ruling oligarchy will find less arduous and wasteful ways of governing and of satisfying its lust for power, and these ways will resemble those which I describe in A Brave New World." What is the biggest takeaway for you from A Brave New World by Aldous Huxley?
That's a really great quote, and I think the biggest takeaway from like Brave New World is like, yeah, it's not about the brute force. It's not about the boot on the neck, because that's so obvious. That's an obvious injustice. It's like breeding injustice into the fiber of humanity, whether it's through like deciding what jobs certain people are going to do, maybe like toying with genetics, eventually, or, like just breeding out certain characteristics to make people more like docile or dumber or like less aggressive, which is like, we see that, right? With like with pharmaceuticals and plastics, and you could read many studies about how testosterone levels in men have gone down drastically over time. So it's so scary, because it's like we're moving closer and closer to to what he wrote about. And right, it's about like softer pressure, softer power. It's not about boot on the neck. It's not about like, being crowded into a gulag. It's not about being shuffled onto a train and gassed. It's like, oh, we're gonna make you oppress yourself, and it's less work for them. And if we can oppress one another, even better. If the corporations can oppress you, great, less for us to do. And it's about like oppression and authoritarianism comes in forms you may not expect. So like, keep your head on a swivel, and like, if something seems funny to you, question it always. And when they won't let you question it, then you need to dig even deeper.
Chrissie Mayr, dates coming up as far as a tour goes?
Yeah, I'm going to be performing with Comedians of the Compound back in Long Island on February 26th. Then I'll be heading to Savannah, Georgia, the Wormhole Comedy Club, March 19th. And then March 20th, I'll be back in Florida doing Side Splitters in Tampa. I also have a stand-up comedy album coming out. I think it's going to be called Live from January 6th. I'm going to have a bunch of jokes in there about being... Yeah, it's fucking great, man. We recorded it a couple weeks ago at Governor's in Long Island, and I got a bunch of new material about January 6th, which probably not that many comedians have, or, I think there's only a few of us who were even there that day. I think I'm one of maybe 2 or 3 comics who were there that day, and like, I think I'm the only one talking about it. So I'm excited for that to come out. I think it will, it's been cut up into tracks. My friend Aaron Berg started a company called Uncancelable Records, so I'm so proud to have him producing this, and I think it'll be ready sometime next month. But when it is, I'll be posting about it. I won't be able to shut up about it, so you guys will know where to pre-order, and I also want to have it put on vinyl so people can have that option as well.
Thanks to everyone for watching the Libertarian Institute and Keith Knight Don't Tread on Anyone. Chrissie Mayr, thanks so much for your time.
Thanks, Keith. Nice spins.